Hello and welcome to the Property Rights Australia podcast. Today we'll be looking at high voltage power line development from a Victorian perspective, and to do this we've managed to speak with Katherine Myers. Katherine is a farm management consultant, valuer and policy analyst by training. She's now a mum, wife, farmer and volunteer, and she took a second year of maternity leave to spend more time with 3 young children and has found herself busier than ever professionally. Katherine is also part of a movement in Victoria called Stop AusNet's Towers to engage with the local community and those impacted by the development of this kind of infrastructure, to advocate to government on behalf of the community to look at alternatives. A great discussion and some food for thought here for those in Queensland leading the charge on fighting the development of this infrastructure and providing alternative policy options to government. Thank you for supporting PRA, and I'll hand over to Katherine. What we're going to talk about today is your role in this particular issue from a Victorian point of view. So again, thank you for your time today. So let me ask you, mate, how did you ratchet up political influence to help with this cause?
There's 2 main groups down here working in opposition to a transmission line in our district, and both have got very, very different approaches. So one group is very much around loud signs and activism. They've got Piss Off AusNet play out into the side of a hill, and they're really, really good at getting that sort of instant reaction to their cause. Our organisation, Stop AusNet Towers, has taken the other path, and we've taken the evidence-based, slow, step-by-step process of making sure our technical information is excellent, and we've done all the background to rebut any claims that are made. And we've really become a go-to for a lot of political people who are in opposition to this project to come to us and get the real evidence behind what the issues are, how they play out, and the genuine impact on communities.
In terms of creating that evidence base, why did you go down the track of doing that, and what was the process? So did you get scientists in? Was it a committee? How did you go about that?
Yeah, so it's really based on quality people, and we were lucky. This is a huge project and it affects thousands of landholders across a 240 kilometre long transmission line easement. So the organisation was originally started about in the middle, and they set themselves up really cleverly. So they had an overseeing board or steering committee, and then they set up separate working groups for the key areas that we knew were going to be critical. So we've got a legal working group who are looking at the property rights issues, the legality of the project and the planning process, and also the environmental effects statement, which here in Victoria is that environmental or impact planning process to get approvals signed off. They also set up a technical working group who were based on engineers and people who were really experienced in technical work and planning. And they did all the technical rebuttals. So they learnt more about high voltage direct current undergrounding than anyone could know. And they actually did the work for one of the local councils in scoping up a project to get a formal technical report completed, which we could then hand over to politicians or the media to show exactly why there are alternative technologies that are much more suitable for energy transmission. To give you some quick figures, it's a big process and it's an expensive process. So in the first year Stop AusNet Towers were running, we clocked about 20,000 volunteer hours. Our current spend to date is just under $300,000, and we've employed not only the technical electrical experts in doing that feasibility and costing study of an alternative technology, but we've also had to hire valuers to look at the impact on land values across the corridor, and economic experts to understand the process that AEMO normally take to do the economic evaluation of projects like this and rebut it, as well as lawyers to get our legal case up to where it got to.
Wow, 300,000. That's not it's not a small amount of money. So okay, so there is a cost involved, obviously. To get the buy-in at a community government level, what platforms did you use to get to politicians in the community?
Yeah, so all the common ones. Social media was a really big one. Unfortunately, this project came along at the same time as COVID, so we were really restricted on what we were able to do in terms of getting people together. But the public meetings up and down the line. So instead of having one and, say, putting it online for people to look at, we replicated the same meeting right down the length of the corridor. So we'd get a representative from our technical working group, our legal working group, and the chair of our steering committee, and we'd go along to maybe 5 or 6 communities every time we held a public meeting and replicate that meeting over a period of weeks. So we do a roadshow rather than a one-off meeting to make sure everyone was getting the same information and that we were keeping the community together. COVID really showed us how important it is for any kind of grassroots campaign to have people together and in the same room, as much as anything to gather support, to gather energy and gather momentum, but also allow people to grieve for the process, because it is stressful and it is traumatic, and getting people together it's a human way of dealing with that kind of stress.
In terms of holding those meetings, you asked the same questions at every meeting to get the data that you needed up and down the proposed corridors.
This was more about giving information to the community,
Okay, yep.
keeping them updated on what we were doing, and then using that as the grounds for fundraising and for support. So because we knew we were going to be challenging the process, we had to be able to demonstrate that we were a public interest group, which means we had to demonstrate that we were representing everyone or a large number of people involved in this project. So we have just under 3,000 members, I think, and they're all the way down the corridor for this project. So if we did get a chance to go to court, we can demonstrate that we do fully represent that community.
What's been the community response? I mean, one of the metrics is fundraising. So that 300,000, did that come from community contributions?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
One really big one that was successful, probably one of the industries that's going to be the most affected by this corridor is the potato growing industry in our area. So the Central Highlands of Victoria is a very intensively farmed, high value horticultural region. And so the growers got together and voted on having a voluntary levy. So every grower in the region donated $2 per tonne of potatoes they produced in the 2020-21 season. And that raised nearly $150,000 towards the cause.
It's always interesting who will actually come along to contribute to a fight like this, because it's out of mind, out of sight, out of mind, until you realise what's at stake and just how many people are impacted by the one project. And that was the case that you were fighting, where it was one project that was going to be the bugbear for you.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah,
There's
okay.
a project being planned that was supposed to affect the same community, but they've just realised this isn't a good place to build electrical infrastructure. So they've shifted that second project away from here.
The Victorian government, has its approach been, generally speaking, positive, divisive, or somewhere in between?
Very much depends on who you're speaking to. So the Labor government have been very challenging to engage with down here. They're the government in power and it's their project, and they really had very little interest in engaging with us. They knew it was going to be a controversial project. In the 3 years we've been campaigning, we've been able to have 1.5 hour meeting with the Energy Minister. We've met with the Ag Minister a couple of times, and she did come out on farm to sit down and talk to us about the impacts, but was not genuinely interested in being involved. When it comes to the opposition party, it was very interesting. The local member here was interested in getting it shifted to another region, and our organisation, Stop AusNet Towers, have never advocated for it to be shifted to another community. We've always advocated for a better technological outcome, because it's a very hollow victory if we then shift exactly the same issues around fire, around food production onto another community. So part of the Liberal Party went down that line, whereas one senator has just been fantastic and she's engaged with us really well from the beginning. And she actually asked members of the Stop AusNet Towers team to help her develop a better strategy for energy going forwards, and that included the development of a centre of excellence for high voltage direct current undergrounding in Melbourne, and then a really well structured strategic plan around underground cables going out to the renewable energy zones to allow that development with minimal community impact.
More power to you for not shifting the problem to another community, because you did mention the mental health impacts, and it's nothing I want to rehash with you, because I know it's still probably raw with you. And suffice it to say that, you don't want to be putting other communities through this if you don't need to. And the fact that you didn't is a great outcome. So finally, if I can, Katherine, what have you learned from the process? And I know it's not over and it'll continue, but what's the biggest learnings you can share with us?
A good question. I think absolutely be prepared for it to be a marathon, not a sprint. I dove in headfirst right at the very beginning and I committed everything. That was just as I was starting my maternity leave with my now 2.5-year-old child, and I burnt myself out. I worked so hard for 2 years and I attended every meeting and I did everything that I could. I did so much media, and I sort of missed the first 2 years of his life, and it's still going. We're not in any better position now when baby John's been born. So learn that, it's going to be going for some time. Pace yourself, speak to your local community. I think also the value of people, recognising how important everyone's input is. So on our different committee meetings, so say our legal working group, we've got lawyers, we've got property valuers, we've got planning professionals, we've got farmers, and everyone has their part to play and everyone has their role to play. So make sure you appreciate the input that everyone has into a fight like this, and never underestimate what they're doing in the background, because it's huge. The one other thing that I've learned from this is how really good things come out of a difficult situation. And our community has really come together over this. I know a community over from us called Warragul, they were split in half by wind farms about 15 years ago. And there are people who haven't spoken to each other since the wind farm fight 15 years ago. But we had a community meeting there nearly two years ago now. And there were people in that room who had never been in the same room since the wind farms. They sat down, they came together for this new bigger evil. And so that's a really positive thing to take away. So always look for the small wins, because it very much is 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
I'd like to thank Katherine for her time on behalf of Property Rights Australia. Thanks again for your support. I will put links to our website, Facebook page and a membership form. If you'd like to know more, please contact us at the office. Thanks again for following this podcast, and we'll catch you on the next episode.